You are far from your post, Inquisitor. What brings you here? They are monuments to Woodika's greatest servants among my people.
I think I'll speed it up because I already have all of this. The answer is
There are
no
many
gods.
who continue.
Basically, to make it short. Gods do not exist, only Ingwithians.
How did you find it? Another in a string of acts of petty. Then she should have obeyed. I ask one thing of all my followers. What of your cohorts then? You. You worshipped Aethys. Your spies are. Yet when
He's gonna ask all of them. Try to twist their minds.
Yet
They're all
the other.
still with me.
Oh, you. I understand.
There,
Yet
the Inenic.
state your name and my name. You and you. I gather you have had your soul awakened. Why else would you shadow my footsteps like? I answered your questions once. That your soul is not fit to accept the answers is of little concern to me.
You know what?
Hear me, Woodika.
Let's fight him.
Roak 10!
Kill those two things first. Then Thaos. They look amazing. Give Thaos something like this, because he is strong as fuck. Make him occupied. Give him some occupation there. Now, where's that one? I think I have enough time. Remove him there. Kana there. Priest. Also there. Now we're gonna do this. Use Case of Adragam. Right there. Do that. This. That's fine. See if we can get him petrified. He's petrified. Just wreck him. Get some crits. The fuck are you all doing? Prone, dazed and frightened and whatever.
We're losing people.
Make the bastard through that one! Make the bastard!
Can we kill him? Today? Oh, what we summon Spot. What do you got? Ooh, nice. Guess that. Then I better think about it or recast it. Just like that. Charge. do this. No need to do anything else, I guess. Although, it's becoming handy. Whoa, 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 whoa.
Stones and expo.
Do not hit Thaos, hit that. Hit this. Seven. What's left over there? There. Trigger. Let's heal a bit.
So much for you.
Get some crits on.
Watch your fire.
This. That. This. And that.
La Faru.
Motherfucker. This.
Okay. Like word. That rock
Duplicates. Oh no, Palegina. Shit. Yeah, whatever. And now what? How the fuck you heal that much? Start to paralyze.
mow it. Well, okay.
Damn it, Thaos. Oh shit. Take this. I'm stunned.
What? Curse your eyes!
Hey,
Curses!
Oh fuck, he's full HP.
Beckworth and Raw!
Fire!
Jesus Christ.
Watch with that.
We're one fewer now.
Our Beckworth and Raw!
Watch where
Our
you're aiming at
Beckworth.
I have.
Fucking hilarious.
You had the nerve.
Hilarious.
That's not what I meant by. Try eat him.
Love will be on. Seek. That's not very helpful.
That's not what I meant by trying.
I don't know what to do with him. Okay, Durance is playing.
What? Someone build.
Jesus Christ.
Lava will be on. Seek. Lava will be on. Seek.
Forgive me, Woodica.
Is that
Let's spoil
Jesus
down
Christ? Unbelievable.
All those lifetimes spent to preserve a single vital secret. I can't imagine having that much certainty.
That's the servant down, and the mistress still to go. A good start, worthy of being built upon.
In his own way, Thaos must have truly believed he was caring for the people of Eora, protecting them from themselves. A shame his soul won't have a chance to reflect on his errors before it enters the wheel.
Some point, you have to look at the things your god is telling you to do, and ask yourself if it's worth it.
He spent his lives, more than any of us will ever know. For what? Binding the world to a lie. Could a man like that ever be redeemed?
Explore their soul. Return to the cycle. Tear his soul apart. Banish his soul to Bretiman. I'm gonna imprison him to Bretiman. Banish his soul to Bretiman.
To apply the teachings of Durance would more immediately satisfy the cravings in my bones. But this is the stronger lesson, for his soul is already marked by his own hand.
Perhaps this is the best place in the world for Thaos. Somewhere he can't cause further harm. Still, you eventually found the Ovara. What is a few thousand years to someone like him?
Cries for mercy.
Yes?
Laying low.
Let's finish with this and get a conclusion.
So much for Thaos, then. Now you have a chance to set things right, back to the proper order of things. It will take the Deerwood generations to recover, but at least these souls will find their way back to the wheel, as it should be.
Hey. Thaos, he had hold of your soul from a long time back, seems like. You get what you needed from him? Well, those can be hard to come by, but maybe that's best. You'll be feeling better soon, then. Good. That's real good. You got it figured out what you're going to do about all that? Got a lot of people out there thinking they've been abandoned by their gods. There's not much that'll put the fear in you more than that. You can take my word for it. If it was in my power, and I know it's not, but if it was, I'd find a way to give them the courage to face it. Not because they think there's some god looking out for them, but because they've just got it in them. And after what you've been through, though, I'm sure you got your own ideas. Astounding.
I always knew the leaden key stood for something big, but I didn't quite realize what I'd gotten myself into. And now, you're in the middle of something even bigger. With a decision that will affect millions. But even if you send the souls somewhere specific now, who knows what the next turn of the wheel will make of them? We can't really control what happens to them. Nor should we try. I had to see the monster Thaos had become to realize that. It's your decision, of course. And whatever you decide, I'm glad our paths crossed in Gilded Vale.
Ah, the end of the road greets us at last. You fared well, Watcher. Better than any Watcher has right to. Seems you were a field in need of a flame's cleansing. Would that my own trial had produced such an outcome. I had figured myself for the field all this time. But you were the field, and I the darkness. A lesson neither of Durance nor of Margarin. But with that trial's end, a new one begins. A god's trial. And I will stand in judgment without mercy.
Kana.
We've come to the end of it, my friend. It has been an honor to walk this road with you, and I will regret our parting. Do you think a single man might change the course of destiny?
Yes.
You know the bitterness of servitude, Watcher. The sting of the lash on your back, and scalding rage in your chest as you watch your masters grow fat on your toils. Oil and wine dribbling down their chins while blood runs from yours. You have labored at the pleasure of others. That shriveled hag in Hadrat House, those pompous dear wooden zealots, the wretched tribesmen playing out their fantasies of grandeur. And then you cowered and knelt before the gods themselves, begging one paltry favor, and receiving riddles and visions in response. And now the gods give you orders and commands, even while you set out to fix what they cannot. Yet what have they offered you? The exiled queen is not an ungrateful patron. Finish the work Thaos began. Strengthen Woodica with these souls and allow her to become the most powerful of all the gods, with you as her favored.
I won't help you.
You say that now, but when you're standing in front of the machine, considering the lifetimes and the powers that await you...
Let's finish. Speak the command. Send the souls back in the reincarnation cycle. Return the souls to the bodies they were intended for. Entropically disintegrate the souls, ending their existence. Distribute the essence the existing souls in Deerwood to strengthen them. Allow the souls to pass through the vein to Woodica. Disperse the souls to an unknown location. Return the souls to the bodies they were intended for. That's the option, and my choosing. Now let's see the ending.
At your command, the ancient device became your instrument, spinning to life with deafening resonance and gathering up the swirling essence like thread on a great spindle. There, in the pale, pulsing glow of the machine that set you on this path long ago, you summoned all your strength, focusing on your objective and blocking out all else. With a single concussive blast that rocked the chamber and sent you tumbling to the ground, you freed the souls from their stasis. Exhausted, your consciousness slipping away, your last sight was of the machine, dark and dormant. Then your eyes closed, and sleep welcomed you at long last. After coming to and searching for some time, you discovered the route Thaos used to enter Sun and Shadow, and embarked on a long and arduous ascent back to the surface. You emerged in Ter Evron after days of tunneling through the rubble Thaos had left behind, and when you stepped into the daylight, you were faced with a different Deerwood than the one you had left. At your direction, the souls diverted by Thaos were guided back to the vessels originally meant for them. For the first time, parents of hollow-born children woke to the cries of their infants and looked into their eyes to see them staring back. People fell to their knees where they stood, thanking Helia or Mogren, or even Aethys for their forgiveness of whatever guilt they felt they bore. But for all the relief that had come to some parents, others only found new grief. For many thousands of Hollowborn had died during Wideone's legacy, many by their parents' own hands. For those children, there would be no homecoming. Yet the last Hollow birth was in the past now, and those parents willing to risk trying for a new child were frequently rewarded, often with twins. Many felt they saw Helia's hand in it, and the year would be remembered as the year of Helia's splendor. It is said that Galawain is the enforcer of the guards, and is known to hunt down those who wrong them. To wrong Galawain, then, is truly to wake the beast, and the father of monsters took great umbrage at your broken promise to him. Along with Mogren and Abidan, Galawain embarked upon a more direct approach to claiming his quarry. In the months that followed, the frontier settlements of Deerwood were inexplicably attacked by packs of beasts and monsters, suddenly organized and unafraid to approach Kith on their own land. Many such villages were all but destroyed by the time troops could be dispatched from local garrisons. Those that weren't destroyed by the beasts of Galawain often found themselves at the mercy of the fires of Mogren. A dry spell throughout Deerwood led to a rash of forest fires on a scale not seen since the War of Black Trees, and many settlements paid the price for their proximity to the wilderness. In the cities, meanwhile, dabblers in animancy who had placed souls into golems and other moving vessels soon found that their creations had risen up against them. Such constructs terrorized their surroundings, killing indiscriminately and often in great numbers before being subdued. Followers of Bereth have a saying that life is a debt all must pay in death, and their god is known to always collect what is owed. In breaking your word to Bereth, a debt was created. Souls were owed to the cycle, and the agents of the god of inevitability would not be refused. An epidemic of unexplained deaths struck Deerwood in the days that followed the legacy. Most often the dead would be travelers on the road, known to be a favorite target of Bereth's pallid knight, who exacts impossible tolls from those who have journeyed for too long. The elderly, too, seemed to pass on in alarming numbers. But just as often, the deaths appeared to strike randomly, and for no reason at all. Those who sensed the involvement of the twinned god dubbed the calamity Bereth's price, supposing it a payment for the end of Wideone's legacy. Lord Radric's zeal had brought him back to life once, but it would not do so again. Radric's destruction at your hands spelled the end of his suffocating rule over Gilded Vale and the surrounding area. In his absence, the village prospered, becoming a popular destination for new settlers anxious to leave Defiance Bay after the riots. Without a nearby ruler, it also grew more wild, with many settlers moving on as soon as they'd arrived, turned off by lawlessness that was excessive even by Deerwooden standards. Nevertheless, despite the challenges of living there, Gilded Vale had survived, and would continue to survive for the foreseeable future. Following the assassinations of Duke Avar Wolfgren and Lady Webb, Defiance Bay was thrown into political upheaval. In the ensuing weeks, the streets had become the domain of looters and blackguards. Few dared to step outside their own doors alone or unarmed. But once the dozens had regrouped in the wake of the riots, they quickly put an end to the criminal activity. They patrolled the streets in droves and administered their brand of law on any perceived offenders. This was not the erratic justice of the mob, however. The dozens had taken to heart the strengths of their adversaries, the Knights of the Crucible, and emerged as a far more organized, disciplined force. With the waning strength of the other Defiance Bay powers, the leadership of the dozens took the opportunity to establish its own group as the dominant peacekeeping force in the city. The dozens would soon find themselves overwhelmed by the problems of a leaderless metropolis. But they found an uneasy new partner in the surviving forces of the Crucible Knights, who understood the city's infrastructure and were able to keep the worst of its problems under control. The destruction of the machine atop Ter Noaneth spelled the end of the reanimated corpses in Heritage Hill. Though at first few were willing to venture into the abandoned district, it was soon cleaned out and rebuilt. The district's horrors still fresh in people's minds, it would be some time before it was fully repopulated. But eventually the lure of cheap prime land would all but erase the memory. The Duke's assassination at the apparent hands of an animancer had caused catastrophic rioting in the streets of Defiance Bay. But those who had escaped the melee in the palace hearings remembered the testimonies of the strange guest who had shown up that day and absolved animancy, implicating the leaden key instead. The rumor spread quickly, and soon the popular belief was that the assassin had been a leaden key spy. When the legacy had lifted, people came to see it not as a sign that the riots had been according to the gods' wishes, as Thaos had hoped, but as a confirmation that animancy had never been the source of the problem in the first place. Deerwoodans instead convinced themselves that the riots had somehow purged Defiance Bay of leaden key spies, and that the end of Widewind's legacy was their well-deserved reward. The rage against animancers was quickly forgotten, and those who had survived were permitted to return to Brackenberry Sanitarium and rebuild it so they might resume their studies. Abidon's renewal brought new vigor and purpose to a god long known for quiet, steady labor. Handicraft saw a revival in the Deerwood, and no smith wanted for an apprentice. Additionally, Abidon's restored interest in preservation led to redoubled efforts to survey Engwithan ruins. Animancers and craftsmen alike found much to study, but tensions with Aer Glanfath rose.
Why?
As for Stalwart, the Battle of Caeron's Scar only strengthened their resolve to unlock the mysteries of Durgan steel and build new marvels with the White Forge. However, Stalwart's ambitions brought them into further conflict with the Raid Serens, as more and more impoverished communities gathered at the border and vowed to finish the work of the Iron Flail. It would be many generations before the region saw peace.
Right.
The battle against the Eyeless left Stalwart more hostile than ever toward the ogres in its midst, and the villagers grew bolder as they grew more prosperous. After a handful of bloody skirmishes, the Flames That Whisper clan left the Russet Wood to seek a quieter, more isolated home in the White March. While many such places existed in the mountains, the crossing was treacherous, and the ogres often found themselves embattled with other clans whose territory they passed. Less than half of the Flames That Whisper survived the journey, but those that did found a haven far from Kith lands. Maneha never found the Salt Well, but she found a kind of peace in her duties as a gift-bearer and in the ebb and flow
I don't
of
give
her
a
journeys.
fuck about her.
As she traveled and accepted,
No, I
the
don't give a
fortress
fuck
of
about her.
Cadnua emerged as a bastion of security in the midst of an untamed land, becoming the envy of every thane and earl in Deerwood. Legend grew over time of its impregnability, and stories of formidable invaders easily scattered by the keep's defenses became popular around the hearths of Deerwoodinians. Likewise, It also became a beacon to travelers, merchants, and visiting dignitaries alike. Reputed as the finest fortress in all Deerwood, people would journey from near and distant lands alike to experience its fabled hospitality and grandeur. After the death of the Master below, a strange quiet fell over the endless paths of Ad Nua. The attacks on the fortress above ceased, Ad Nua's silent titan the closest remaining thing to a master in its musty, forgotten passages. Pallegina had gone against the Duke's Bell's orders by inventing a new trade arrangement with the Anamenfath to accommodate the recovering Deerwooden market. With the Deerwood's people still weakened by Weidman's legacy, the Valian republics easily pushed their would-be competitors out of the market. For her outrageous insubordination and audacity, Pallegina was banished from the republics. She traveled north in the Eastern Reach, avoiding Valian ports and entering the ranks of the kind wayfarers. Despite her bravery and dedication to those in her care, her strange appearance made her feel like an outsider wherever she went. Adair chose not to return home to Gilded Vale. Still most comfortable far from cities, he settled in Deerford, which, like many towns in the Deerwood, was beginning the slow process of rebuilding. Believing now that it was the obligation of Kith to be the leaders their gods had not, Adair was soon named mayor of the town, and under his guidance, Deerford soon began to prosper. He expelled the last of the Scanites from the area and drew new settlers with the offer of land, a trick he had learned from someone he otherwise preferred to forget. With each passing day, Deerford would come to more closely resemble the Gilded Vale of Adair's childhood, the one worthy of its name. When the dust settled in sun and shadow, Aloth looked upon the remains of Thaos Exarchanon, his former master. He saw where the Grand Master had gone wrong and what would be required to undo the harm Thaos had wrought. With a flick of his wrist, he burned Thaos's robe, headdress, and every other symbol of the man's power. Never again, he vowed, should Kith live in fear and blind obedience to an authority they did not understand. Armed with the knowledge and courage he had gained on his journeys with the Watcher, he set out on the long and lonely task of dismantling the Leaden Key. With the Watcher's goals accomplished and his own vows fulfilled, Kanarua sailed back toward Rawatai, thinking on the lessons his travels had provided him. By the time he landed at Tekoa, he understood what his path must be. Standing before the Lore College, Kanarua explained that the tablet he sought had been destroyed, and so a true interpretation of the Tonvi Oratoa could no longer exist. The people of Rawatai would have to create their own. He described the many strange things he had seen in his travels, and announced his intent to pursue the accumulation of knowledge abroad, seeking answers to new questions. True to his word, Kana soon set sail on yet another expedition, and in Tekoa, his passionate accounts inspired many to follow in his footsteps. With Thaos defeated and the souls released from sun and shadow, healthy children were born once again in the Deerwood. The grieving mother sought a place where she might do penance for the birthing bell. She returned to Deerford, where, to the astonishment of the villagers, she delivered. Durrance used Mogren's strength only until Thaos had been cast from the world, and then swore off her influence entirely. Regret came to weigh heavily on his mind, and a man who had never previously lacked for words or opinions came to embrace silence and contemplation. He continued to wander, penniless and destitute, searching now not for the reason for his goddess's silence, but for a mechanism for revenge. The charred robes he continued to wear as a reminder that he had been burned by his goddess, and not just by the flames of the Godhammer. You and Sagani never found Persok together. The Adra figurine 20 years passed before she also learned that, for you, the death of Thaos brought an end to your waking visions, and a silence to the whispers of the past. In their absence, you were able to sleep. The questions of a distant lifetime ceased to trouble your soul. All that remained was what to make of the answer. But at the moment, there was little to be done, and the matter would have to wait. A long journey loomed ahead.
Well, I think I got the best ending. I did everything I could. There is